Today we're going to talk about the history of food and its effects on what we eat today, and the culture and the dominance of like the British Empire for an example, and how it directly affected the our culinary history is wrapped around war and famine and migration and necessity and arrogance, and it's interwoven. I'm gonna make that word up. That's my new word of the day. Hey Rex, how's it going? Okay, but hey Rex had hey lessons at work, so I had to run. But wanted to say, hey brother, enjoy the stream. Thank you Rex, I appreciate it. Enjoy your work. Cook something awesome, or don't, because it's cool because they already pay for it, but before they get it. I'm kidding. Do your best. That's all you can do. But we're going to go over from day one until today. We go back as far as the recorded history and beyond, because there are things that are in our diets that we eat that are pre-written history, and I think it's fascinating. I think that you can't cook food unless you have a grasp on the history of the food behind it. Because I've been in a lot of places, and every time I go somewhere, I see the food they're eating, and it's interesting to me that you're like, I did not expect that to be like when I went to the Bahamas. I was working for a gentleman, and he flew me to the Bahamas to cook for his family, and we went out to eat at the local. I wanted to really immerse myself, and we go out to eat, and it's just like pub British food is what they were serving, which blew my mind. But then as I found out, the research is that the British Empire was in control of the Bahamas, and they influenced the food of those people. So, and that happened all over the world. So as we get into it, I'm trying to make a connection. The reason I want to do history first before we ever pick up a knife or pick up a pan is because if you don't appreciate the history, then it's really difficult to understand how everything ended up where it is. Because there's a lot of stories, and it's also nice to know the history of what you're dealing with, so that you're able to, like I said, not only cook it and enjoy it, but you get a lot more out of it if you know where it comes from and why it is what it is. If I set everything up correctly, you're looking at a map in front of you with the world on it, and there should be little red lines all over it. And once we get into talking about what all that is, then that's the beginning of tying everything together. So the humankind, as we started in Africa, and that's what on the left hand side, I don't know if it'd be the right hand side on your computer, but on the left hand side you'll see Africa, and it's inundated with the red. That is the creation of man. And then all you do is follow the arrows. As men started to, or as human beings started to migrate, they migrated all the way up, and they went towards Europe, and then they went over and they migrated towards Asia, into Russia, and then down from Asia to the Southeast Asia, which is the Philippines, the Guam, and all of the islands. And then they went down and they migrated to Australia, and then all the way down. And then as they left there, they went up through Russia, and they went across the into Alaska, then down to the United States, and then up, and then down into South America. That's our history of migration as human beings. And all along there, as they migrated, they took the food from where they were, and as they came to a new place, then they had to adapt. And there's a good story about whenever the colonial Europeans came to the United States, they tried to eat and grow what they were used to growing and eating in Europe, and it wasn't working. They were becoming malnutrition. The stuff they were planting in the ground wouldn't grow, And that's why the Native Americans came in the United States, and they helped them to learn how to make or learn how to grow maize, and they learned how to cultivate the soil in the United States to grow different crop so that they were able to feed themselves to survive while they were over here. So everything as they would migrate through, they would start to pick up different cultures, and they would pick up the people that, because the indigenous people of that time, as they were started the migration, and then people after that would follow, and generations would follow after that. So as the world became populated, that was the basic route that everybody, that the humankind took, was to go through from Africa, through Asia, or I'm sorry, through, yeah, pretty much Europe, Asia, over to Alaska, the United States, and then down to South America. So the human beings basically ended up in South America. That's where they ran into the last part of land. But that's basically, if you start to break down the food from these countries, you can see the influence is always stair-step from the place they came from. So you see a lot of Asian influence in Alaskan food, because and Russian food is also an influence into Alaskan food, which then came down into the United States. And then once the Europeans came over looking for roots around South America, or around Africa, to get in on the Silk Road trading, because that's the next part, which I thought was really cool. So whenever they came over, they brought with them their culture and their and their diseases and everything, and it kind of changed the landscape of wherever they ended up. So I just wanted to kind of give you a basic idea of how human beings populated the earth with the migration from Africa to South America. So that's kind of the route that they took, and we'll probably be jumping back and forth on this picture just to kind of reiterate and tie back in what we're talking about. And then if we go to the most important, I'm not going to go to it yet, not yet, but at the time, Asia was the place that was putting out the items that were valuable, like gold and silk, and what was also being transported on this, which is called it was called the Silk Road Highway, or trade route. And that all the spices and herbs and silk and gold were going along. You can change it now to the Silk Road. Let's see if this works. Everyone cross your fingers and click it. Hey, look at that. So the blue line above, that was the original Silk Road, which it would go from China over into Europe. And then as the Silk Road, they tried to find alternate routes, because this is a really interesting comparison. Because whenever Europeans started to get stuff off the Silk Road, they were, once they found out what they were paying for, and I want to give you a little example as to so that you can wrap your head around how much herbs and spices that were originally from Asia, whenever they would come over, all the little areas that they had to stop in were purchased and then resold, and a profit was added to it. So if you want to look at that in today's term, in South America, and if they harvest cocaine, and then they bring it into the United States and they sell it, the profit for that amount from getting it from the distributor to actually getting it from the end supplier, if you look at that in terms of spices, in the Silk Road, if in China, there's the cocaine in South America to America has a 1300% markup. So what you pay for it out of raw product, and by the time it gets to America, cocaine is 1300% markup. Okay, spices at the time that the Silk Road was happening were marked up 3 times that. So that is 13 times 3 is 26. Yeah, wait, no, 26, 39. 3,900% markup on spices like cumin and just simple, cinnamon. Those spices were marked up that much. So Europeans and the people on the end of the Silk Road wanted to find a way to basically go around it. So they started to send out explorers to try and find an alternate route to the source. And at first, whenever Christopher Columbus, he went to the, then he went in and he wanted to find a different route, but they wouldn't do it. But then once it started, the prices for the goods they were getting off the Silk Road was so ridiculous, his government funded him to do an expedition to try and find a route around the continent of Africa to get to the Silk Road. So he set sail, and that was what he was doing. He wasn't an explorer. He wasn't trying to discover new lands. He was just trying to find a different route to basically go around all of the little areas that were on the Silk Road that would completely just like I said, they would buy it and they would resell it for a profit. One second, sorry. Okay, that was no big deal. So, whenever Christopher Columbus left, he took his ships, and he ended up, if you go to the Christopher Columbus click, he took 4 trips. His first voyage, and he was actually trying to go around Africa, and for some reason, he ended up on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and he ran into Cuba, which is now Cuba. And so he obviously missed his mark a lot, but he found the stuff that was in the Bahamas and Cuba. He found stuff that he could bring back, which was gold, and so he started to set up a line between the Caribbean and back to Spain. So he would go back and forth. He made 4 trips, and none of those trips did he ever end up in the United States, or in he never ended up in North America. But it's interesting that people, we as Americans, we look at it as he was an explorer. He was discovering new lands. No, he was just looking for a cheaper spice, so he went that way. But that directly affected how the Europeans and the Spanish and everything, how their food was influenced by the food that came from the air of the spices, and the product that he was bringing back from that area was directly influencing the culinary. And they basically started to, because the Silk Road was coming in, go back to the Silk Road. So all the herbs and spices that were coming from the Silk Road were, if you look at it today's terms, there are a lot of Indian spices. So there was turmeric, and there was cinnamon, and there was coriander, and there was all these very, very strong spices. And then they would come in, and then the route between South America or the Caribbean and Europe, it was inundating that area, the French, with a lot of spices, and they got to the point where they were just overspicing everything. And at first it was to hide the flavor of bad meat, but it just became too much. And then in the 17th century, a gentleman by Sir Francis in 1651, I wrote down some notes so I wouldn't get lost. He basically wrote a book saying that vegetables should taste like vegetables and meat should taste like meat. So what he was saying is, we shouldn't overspice our stuff. We shouldn't put so much stuff on it that it doesn't taste like what it should taste like. And if you look at today's culinary ideas and today's culinary concepts, they're falling straight in line with what he said in the 17th century. Was stop putting all this stuff on it to hide the flavor of it, of the natural ingredients. And every time you see somebody cook something, their main goal is to bring out that natural ingredient, whether it be the protein or the vegetable or the starch, whatever it is. They want it to stand on their own. And that's what he basically said, is we need to stop overspicing everything. And I just always found that interesting, that was kind of the turning point from your traveling type food. And you can always envision that type of food was always, salt cured and over seasoned, and it was just super, super strong. And he basically just turned it around and said everything that we make should have a good flavor to it, and it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be overspiced. And everything that you eat should taste like what you eat. And then, so because originally, before the Silk Road, before the the basically the beginning, the infant stages of trade, if you made something, if you cooked something, you would literally go out in your front yard, and whatever you had growing wild in your front yard is what you would season the food with. And there's some of the things that were there before, they, like honey for instance, is actually before written time. So they've had honey in people's diets. It was the original sugar, it was the original food. So whenever you look back at stuff, there's a point at written history, but there's stuff before that. So all that stuff before that, which is, if you look back, you dig really far back, it starts with honey as a sweetener. And there's cases where they've opened up tombs in Egypt, and they found vials of honey that are still edible. They're still good. As long as air doesn't hit honey, it will last, well, thousands of years. So I think whenever they started opening up the tombs and they started finding this stuff, I think it kind of, you don't, because you don't, when you go to the grocery store and you buy honey, it's sitting on the shelf, you don't think of where it came from, or how actually ingrained into our DNA honey is. That's why certain honeys, if you look at honey now, yeah, you can go to the grocery store and buy honey, but it's actually good for you to eat honey that is local in your area. There's all types of honey too. There's all different flavors, there's all different colors. So honey is just as diverse as anything else that and it's not just the stuff that you find in that little plastic bear. You go to a farmer's market or a fresh market and try and find fresh honey and taste it. It's completely different than what you're used to if all you're buying are those little rubber bears. So whenever you get into this, one of the things that was a big commodity at the time, believe it or not, was common salt. And salt was traded. Salt was used as a currency. The term worth your weight in salt actually comes from the Roman soldiers. They were worth their weight in salt, and they were actually paid in salt. So that was their payment whenever they would do their soldiering stuff, is they would get paid with bags of salt. And for you to be a healthy human being, because we extrude salt when we sweat and we do exercise, the minimum amount of salt that you should intake every day is 6 grams of salt. So that's the minimum. That's just to keep your body functioning. So we as a creature have always had the urge, and we've always had the need to put salt in our diet. So whenever we start cooking, I do a lot of salt. I always bring it back to salt and why salt is important to use in the food, when to use it, how to use it, and then also what it does to the product that we're doing. Because a lot of times before, whenever you would travel somewhere, you didn't have a refrigerator, so you would have to find a way to pack whatever it was you're taking so that you wouldn't get sick by so they literally just bury it in salt, because salt, it's completely what keeps the product away, like the protein. It keeps the bacteria from growing on it. So salt's a big deal, and it's a big deal in the kitchen. And we'll go over the difference between kosher salt, sea salt, and the salt that's mineralized, pink salt. There's also a curing salt that you shouldn't eat, that whenever we go to start curing bacon and we start doing that stuff, then we'll go over the different types of curing salts. And they actually dye it pink so that you don't eat it. It's like they're trying to let you know that, oops, don't put this in your mouth, because it will start to cure you. So you don't want to put that salt on your food. But there's all kinds of salt. But realistically, salt is salt. It comes from the evaporation of the seawater, and it makes salt. Now there's black salt, there's mineral salt, there's, like I said, there's sea salt, but all salt is still just salt. It's salt with other stuff with it. And most kitchens you see, they use kosher salt. And the reason that they use kosher salt is because of the grain size. It holds up to whatever it is you're putting on it for, because you want that, if you're going to cook and you want to create a good meal, then you want that little punch of salt to, and if you have a bigger grain of salt, it just hangs around longer. So when somebody actually takes a bite of it, they're going to get a little piece of that kosher salt left over, and it's going to burst in their mouth, and it's going to change the complexity of the dish they're eating. That's why chefs use kosher salt. It's not any different than table salt, other than take out the caking agent, and it's no different than sea salt. Sea salt's just a flat. If you look at it, like kosher salt is like a little asteroid, and sea salt's like a little flat piece of paper. So kosher salt's really good at the last second, because sea salt's good because it layers your tongue with these like little flakes of salt, and they go away really quickly. So if you just want that sudden snap of salt, and then you want it to go away really quick, and then you want the food flavor to come through, sea salt's great. Kosher salt gives you that pop and that heartiness, and it sticks around longer. So that's really, if you want to start playing around with when you should season food, that's kind of what salt, the different types of salt. As we start to cook, which starts tomorrow, by the way, tomorrow we start our mother sauces. So we're going to go over the 5 mother sauces, how to make them easily in a home kitchen, because we don't have I don't want you to have to go out and buy, because there's like 9 ingredients for the red sauce, and there's no reason for it other than if you want to make straight classical out of the book mother sauce, but you can emulate it and make really good tomato sauce. It's versatile for whatever you're going to use it in, whether it be Italian food or Spanish food or Mexican food, or you'll have a nice basic tomato sauce so that you can use it. And that's what the mother sauces are. There's 5 sauces that you use to create all these other sauces. And so our day tomorrow will be spent dealing with the mother sauces. And as we go along, we'll keep bringing them up, and we'll keep demonstrating how to make them, so that you're versed in what we're doing and how we're doing it. So you're not stuck behind with, what's a mother sauce. But back to our journey. So whenever the Roman soldiers would get paid in salt. Thank you, Ellie. I have trouble learning how much salt to use. My family never uses salt. My mom only used pepper in our house. Unless I use too much or too little. Well, salt's one of those things where, in a lot of people, they put salt in before they should. Salt, the only thing salt should ever do for food is it should accent the food. All it is something to boost the flavor of the food. If it tastes like salt, that's too much salt. And everybody has a different salt tolerance. Everybody reacts to salt differently. That's why in every restaurant you ever go to, there's salt on the table and pepper. But the reason there's salt on the table is because everyone has a gauge. If you've never eaten salt in any of your food, and then you eat a tiny bit of salt, it tastes like you're drowning in salt. But if you're a heavy salter, and no matter, before you even taste a meal, if you immediately start putting salt on it, then you've got a different idea. But I want to take you through and show you how to properly season food, so that whenever you do come to the point where you have to add salt, you know where you're at. Because that's all about taste. And there's some dishes that require more salt to bring out the flavor. And that's what I was talking about when I was talking about yesterday, is you stack. You start to stack flavors, because a really good cook should be able to have, at least when you bite the food, you should have at least 3 competing flavors stacked on top of each other. A professional chef can stack 5. So they'll be able to start stacking 5 flavors. So the initial flavor, and then you get that second flavor, and then you get that middle, which is the one that carries throughout all of it, and then you get to the end, which is usually the heat. If you can pull that off in a single bite, then you're doing right. And that's what I want to teach you guys, is to, like, for instance, soup, something as simple as soup. You think just throw stuff in a pot, but everything that you put in a pot should fit on a spoon, because you want every flavor in that pot to get you want to be able to taste everything that you put in that soup. So if you have 2 ingredients, you cut them big enough to fit on to fit on a spoon. But if you have 5 ingredients, you cut them smaller, so each little piece will stick on a spoon. So you have a single spoon And whenever you go to chop up your vegetables or make your soup, envision just that single bite. And what all do you want the single bite to carry over? So whenever we start making something as simple as you think soup, it gets a little bit more. You got to look at it differently. You got to kind of reprogram yourself when it comes to stuff like this, so that you understand that, I have a 2-ingredient soup. I already know how to cut my vegetables, so that when somebody sticks a single spoon in it, they will get both the vegetables that are in that soup. A potato and a carrot. But if it's got 5 ingredients, then you just cut it smaller, and then I'll teach you how to do the nice cuts and stuff like that. It gives you control. It lets you know that when you come to this certain point, there's a reason that things are done this way. There's a reason that a pho takes forever to make. There's a reason for it, because that's 100% the flavor of a pho, is the broth. Sounds like common sense, but something I've never thought of. Yeah, and it's true. And that's whenever you go to a restaurant or whenever you go out to eat, and you start looking at this stuff in a different way. You start to see it in a way that, from a different perspective. And then you can see the quality of the food before you ever eat it. Because you look at it and you go, oh, look at that soup. There's 9 things in there, and each one of them are bigger than my spoon. Then they don't get it. They don't understand they're not trying to, make it to where all the flavors should be in your mouth at the same time. So, back to history. So basically, we all of our food and all of that comes from somewhere else. So whenever you start to make food, whenever you're like, I'm going to make a dish, X, Y, or Z, it doesn't matter, then the first thing you want to do is there's 3 questions every good chef asks themselves before they start to make food. And I brought this up, and I'm bringing it up again, and I'm going to bring it up 100 times more. There's 3 questions that you should ask yourself before you go to the grocery store, and then re-ask yourself those same 3 questions when you get to the grocery store. And those 3 questions are, the first thing you have to do when you cook a dish is you have to choose a region in the world, because you will never make a dish that hasn't already been attempted. So just be okay with that. But pick a region. So not just a country, because countries are as complex. Their food in a country is as complex as their country's food, if that makes any sense. So you've got to pick a region in a country. So the first thing you pick is regional. So you find a region in the world where you want to eat food from. And the one thing that the internet's great about is you can go on to Google or whichever search engine you use and type in there and say, what are the main spices and herbs of X country? Or if you don't know the region you're hunting for, go, I want African food, which is a continent, and then there's countries, and then there's regions. But you go in there and you go, I want African food, then you pick a country, and then you start to go, I want whatever region. So because Africa has a big swath of spices that are very similar, but once you get those 2 or 3 spices that they use to season their food, like Russia is huge, but their main spice is dill. That's it. It's dill. So if you put dill in a dish and you look at the region that you're cooking it from, which is dill and fish, that is Russian food. And it usually has a bechamel of some sort that's a little bit pickled. That's Russian food. You get that. That's what it is. So once you find a region to cook food from, then you have a bear to wrestle, because now you have something to sink your teeth into. So before you ever left to go to the grocery store, you get on the computer and you go, I want to cook a meal. Yes, gross, dill. And then you pick a region in the world. And then you look up the 3 main, there's usually 3 or 4. Now when you get into like Indian food, there's 5, but there's usually 3 or 4 main spices that they have used throughout their whole existence, which makes it their food. For instance, Cajun food is basically cayenne pepper and thyme. Everything you eat in Cajun food is cayenne pepper and thyme. That's the 2 seasonings that you use when you flavor a Cajun dish. So, Algerian style food, because I think it may have a French touch to it, but I have no idea. Algerian food, again, I don't know every spice. Whenever I make a dish, that's the first thing I do. I make that research. So after I get off here tonight, I'm probably going to go to Algeria and find a region. And the next time that we come in and chat, ask me, and I'll tell you the three main spices and some of their most popular dishes. Because that's what the internet is awesome for. If you want to do research on food history, I don't like the internet for recipes because I think that it takes away the excitement of the journey. I think it takes away from the learning process. Because you can get a recipe to make anything, but that doesn't mean you understand how it works. So once you learn the history of it, and once you start to trace it back to what it actually was meant to be, then you will start to appreciate the how they treated their herbs, where they got them from. Were they imported off the Silk Road, or were they grown? Because a lot of the times stuff went back from Europe to Asia. So a lot of the stuff that was in Italy and Spain and Europe, all that stuff made it back to Asia through the same Silk Road. So it's interesting to know if it was grown there or if it was brought there, and how that directly affects the flavor and the how much is in it. Because if you've ever eaten curry, you know that there's two types of curry. There's British curry, which is just it's usually really, really hot and it's orange, and that's the turmeric that's in it. But it's nothing like curry. Because then you go to Indian and you start working with your masalas, your gram masala, your tiki masalas, all your masalas, which are basically a generic term for a bunch of spices that have been roasted and used. I've got a gram masala that has 7 spices in it, but you can taste every single one of those spices. And like I said, I believe it was yesterday, when you're making food, if you can't taste it, there's no reason for it to be in there. So whenever you go and you try and find a country, there's probably going to be a list of 40 spices that they use, but I guarantee you there's only 2 or 3, maybe 4 that make it that dish. They're the prominent. It's like Italian food. If you had Italian food and it didn't have basil, and it didn't have oregano, and it didn't have sometimes rosemary, if those flavors, French is more rosemary, but if it didn't have those flavors in it, then you wouldn't be able to say that, oh, that's Italian. So that's the trick to learning how to cook food from anywhere in the world. Because you can take one single chicken and you can drag it around the world with 2 or 3 spices from each country and make multitudes of dishes, like thousands of dishes with those 2 simple ingredients. And that's the trick to learning how to cook outside of your comfort zone. If you want to cook from a different country, then that's your beginning step. That's the first thing you do. I'd love to see you spice your spice count. Mine's small, so I could learn a thing or two. Yeah, and once we go into talking about herbs and spices and the difference between the two, and just a little quick shot is you have herbs and you have spices. Okay, spices are dried, and herbs are better fresh, but you can also get them dried. The difference between an herb and a spice, because I get asked this question a lot, because a lot of people don't know that there's a difference between herbs and spices. The difference between an herb and a spice is the spice. So when you're referring to spices, when you go to a grocery store and you look at all that huge aisle of spices, you have to understand that if it's a spice, it is the root, the seed, and the stem of the plant that is referred to as a spice. The only part of a plant that is an herb is the leaf. Everything else is spice. So I want you to remember this, because whenever it comes to cooking, it's super important that you know the difference between an herb and a spice. So remember, an herb is the leaf, and everything else is a spice. And when you cook, you have to remember this. Spices go in at the beginning of the dish, and I'm going to show you how to store them and treat them, and how to bring out the proper flavor in the spice. And then your herbs go in at the end, just right before you serve it. So you have that fresh herb flavor and that burst of fresh, clean, out of the garden flavor. And then you get all the body and you get the deep stuff from the spices. And that's, don't put your herbs in first. And even if you read a recipe that says add your herbs to the tomato sauce, don't do it, because all that those little fragile little leaves do is they just turn sour whenever you cook them. Those are meant to be eaten fresh. and they're meant to be bought fresh, but if you can't get them, you can still get the shake ones. They're not as good. But remember, always separate the two. Know the difference between an herb and a spice, and it's super simple. Remember, spices are everything on the plant except for the leaf, and an herb is the leaf. Yes. Well, it is common sense, but everyone takes it for granted, and everyone doesn't ever answer the question why. Why do I put the spices in before the herbs? Well, because the herbs go bad if you put heat to them. Take any herb and throw it in any type of heat, and immediately it burns. It just turns black. Even whenever you cut up basil, like you're making a tomato basil soup, and you take a knife and you chop up your basil, and then you make your soup, and you turn around and your basil's black. That's because the knife cut through the plant, and the plant had a reaction to it. Because remember, like I said yesterday, that all herbs and spices are poisonous. Okay? Everything that we season our food with is poisonous. It's a plant that is actually poisonous. Oh, Devin's thing's here. He's going to lose his mind. Sorry. We've been waiting on this package all day, and it just got here. Knock on the door. Oh, yeah. Then the dogs go bananas. So he'll be, at least one person's going to be happy today. So, whenever you treat your herbs, you treat them in a certain way. I'm going to show you that you don't store them. Like, you see those fancy spinning spice racks? They're really cool. You usually get one if you get married or if it's Christmas, and they give you, hey, you're going off to college. Here's a spice rack, and it spins around, and you can see the spices, and it looks really cool. Remember that fluorescent lights hit that spice, and it immediately starts to age them. Spices don't last more than 6 months. So when you do go to the grocery store and you get your idea, you've got your region now, you're going to start heading to the grocery store so that you can start picking out the spices that you want. Read the expiration date. Because I guarantee you that spice that you may be looking for probably hasn't even been touched. And after 6 months, it loses, like it drastically cuts in half the potential to bring the oil out of that spice. So be very careful. Always dig in the back. I always go to the back of the spice rack because they usually shove them. Well, usually you take them out and shove them forward, but if they don't, it's either in the front or the back. It's going to be the better of the two. So always check the expiration. And if it's expired, is it the same as salt? No. The only time, if you shake the box and you hear salt, then you're good. Salt's not going to do anything. Salt is salt. They dug it out of the ground, so it doesn't have an expiration date. It really doesn't. I mean, if you look at it, it's probably one on the box for government regulations, but they got it out of the ground. It's thousands of years old. I don't know how you'd put an expiration date on that. That to me would be weird. They're like, it's 10,000 years old and 14 days. So, oh man, I had to wait 10,015 days. So, but salt's good. As long as it stays, as long as it moves around. So whenever you approach your seasonings the same way you would approach your food, it's just as important. So we went to, and we've gotten our region. So we've found in the world, go back to the first one, history. So we found our region. We found out where the migration of human beings had gone through, and we're going to pick a country, and then in that country we're going to find a region. Oh, text here. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Tech support. So, whenever you pick a region, then the second thing you're going to do, whenever you get to the grocery store, okay, is the second question you're going to ask yourself. So you're going to go regional, and then you're going to go seasonal. Okay? What's in season? Now, meat, it's pretty much, because grocery stores nowadays, it's interesting, and it turned whenever they started refrigerating food and traveling across continents and countries. You're able to get just about anything you could eat available all the time. So any grocery store you can go into, we've kind of lost track of the seasons that things are the best at. In other words, fruits and vegetables and produce, they have a window of when they're really good, when they have a lot of flavor to them. So after you picked a region, the next thing you need to determine is seasonal. And that's just as easy to do, because all you got to do is get what is in season. Go to Google, type what vegetables are in, what produce are in season right now, and it will give you a list. so that you'll have an idea. Now, I'm not saying you can't cook a dish if you're like, I'm really set on cooking something from a country, but it requires tomatoes, and tomatoes aren't in season right now. That doesn't mean we can't work around that. There's all the way around that. But ideally, if you want to cook the perfect dish, the dish that is like 100% your best effort, then you want to pick a region, and then you want to check if it's seasonal. And then the third one, which may blow the whole plan up, is availability. Now, most grocery stores now, you can go on there. They have a pickup service, like the one in Texas, the HEB. They have a curbside service where they bring the food out to you. And you go on the website, and a lot of grocery stores that do have websites, you're able to go in there and find out what's actually in that store before you ever even leave your house. So you can actually technically answer all three of those questions before you ever leave the house. Yeah, and probably they're more affordable. Well, actually, they're the most affordable when they're just out of season. Whenever the tomatoes are starting to turn like dark red, which are amazing tomatoes, don't get me wrong. But that's why if you look at the way things are back in the day before refrigeration, that things were canned out of necessity because you would harvest tomatoes at that time, and then all of a sudden the tomatoes would start to go. All the time. It's like whenever you eat food and you feel lethargic or you start to feel weird about it. It's like in America we have Thanksgiving turkey, and you die for turkey in November. But any other time of the year, if somebody built a Thanksgiving meal and set it out in the middle of June, your body would just be like, I don't get this. I don't understand why we're doing this. So it's like pumpkin pies in the winter when it's cold out. And there's all these things that your body is naturally attuned to wanting to eat and craving, and it all has to do with harvest. It all has to do with our ancestors. That's why history is super important. Oh, my dog got in. My Achilles heel is in the building. Hey, come here. Come here. Look at this baby. Oh, you can't even see her. Ha! Wait, stick your head up. So, whenever you start to think of food, I want you to start to remember that you're still programmed to eat like your ancestors ate, which was availability, and they ate seasonal, and they ate within the region that they lived in. If you go back to that style of eating, one, you'll have a path, and one, you can find a lot out about your own past. Because you start to, if you go on like Ancestry.com, or if you know your relatives and you trace them back to the country that they came from, or if you're from that country and it's from a different region, and you start to make that food from that region, it becomes more special. Yeah. So Eli said that it's so cool. I love my ancestors more now because I get the best cravings. Yeah, and it's just something that's ingrained in us in the way we eat, because we've eaten to survive, but we've always tried to excel past just eating something to stay alive. We've always tried to want more. That's what cravings are. I mean, I've never craved a chef knife, or I've never craved a car, but you always crave food because it's the basic. It's what's ingrained in you. So why not find out why? Why not find out what you really like? And once you start to build those roadmaps to different areas, that's like traveling the world for the price of one meal. And you can learn so much about a culture and about their history in just that small amount of research. And to eat their food as they intended it to be eaten is so amazing. And you know, one thing I haven't talked about is at no point did I tell you to go on the internet and type in a recipe for a country. Because you have to learn the region, you have to learn the seasonal, and you have to learn the availability of it before we ever even dip our toes into a recipe. Because you have the power to be able to make food, and like I said yesterday, a chicken is a chicken. It doesn't know what country it's being cooked in because you chopped off its head.
3 for 3 there.
I love that joke. That's my favorite joke. A chicken doesn't know where you're cooking it from because it doesn't have a head. So it doesn't know. So you can cook chicken from Asia, you add 3 or 4 spices to it, and you pick a region in that area that's prominent with those spices, and I don't care what you do to it, it's going to taste like that region's Asian food. I made a lasagna once, and I thought, what the hell, I'll make a Mexican lasagna, right? So all I did was I replaced the basil, I replaced the oregano, and I put caraway, right? I replaced those 3 with cumin, coriander, and some cayenne. Those 3 main spices, which is and everyone, oh my gosh, you made Mexican lasagna. It's like, I didn't call it that in the original, but I was like, holy cow! All I did was change 3 spices, and it was everyone that ate it believed it was a dish from a different country. So you don't have to go through and learn all food from everywhere. You don't have to study French cuisine for years and years to make a French dish. The easiest way to do it is just pick a region in France, find out the availability of the food that you want to cook, pick those 3 or 4 spices, and then it's up to you. The creativity then is in your hands. You're not trying to cook a dish that Scoffier put in a book, 200 years ago. You're cooking from your heart. And as long as you have a roadmap to where you want to end up, which is some country's region, then you're safe. These are all safe points so that you can be creative, so that you can enjoy what you're doing. And you'll learn about countries and you'll learn about history. Here's a really one that I think, this was probably one of the greatest cultural stories. There's 2 of them that I want to talk about. One of them is hang on. If anyone's familiar with Cajun food, which is in Louisiana, that's prominently where the Cajuns are. If anyone's familiar with that story of how they ended up there, basically they were French Canadians, and they were in the southeast Canada and parts of Maine. They're Acadians. Acadians? Yeah, Acadians. I'm sorry, not Arcadians. Acadians. So the Acadians were in that part of the French Acadians were in that part of the world. And then whenever the French and British war, because at one time, if you go, we're going to talk about that. I'm not going to go to that map yet because that one's crazy. So the Acadians were hanging out, right? And the British are like, well, you can stay here, but you have to sign an allegiance to the British Empire so that you can stay there. And the Acadians are like, no, we don't want to do that. We are our own people. We are our own country. So they basically were put on ships, and thousands of them died, drowning in ships that were being shipped back to Europe. A bunch of them ended up in Louisiana. These French Canadians, the Acadians, ended up in Louisiana because that was a spice port was in Louisiana. And the ships that were coming over, and I'll show you in a minute on the map, these spice ports. So there was a small section of French Canadians that were in America and Louisiana. And what happened was when the Acadians came in, that's where the word Cajun comes from. It's from the root word of Acadians. So that's what Cajuns are, is they're French Canadians. So a lot of food that you see in the Cajun food is French. You'll see a lot of French influence in their food because that's what they brought. That's what they brought whenever they were marched out. It was called the expulsion of the Acadians. And they're actually, if you get a chance, it's really super long. But there's a poem written by Longfellow about the actual event whenever they were kicked out. And it's called Evangeline is the name of the poem. It's long, but it's one of his greatest works. And it talks about the expulsion of the Acadians from Canada and how they ended up. And it's basically a love story. It's a girl who lost her bow whenever they rounded them all up and stuck them on ships. So everything's tied into it, and that's where we get Cajun food from. That's why you look at the South and you see an influence the south of the United States, the southern states, you'll see a stark difference in food between those. Yeah. Yes, Gaptilla, Cajun style. And you'll see a drastic difference between North food and South food in America. And that line, the Mason-Dixon line that runs along there, that the food between those two areas are drastically different. And it has everything to do with everything around us. Like the British Empire influenced the French, then moved into Louisiana and made Cajun food. So that then spread out from there. And then you got slaves coming up from Africa, which brought their food and their ideas of cooking, just like when the Europeans came to the United States and they landed there and they weren't able to grow crops, or they weren't able to survive the winters. They had the Native Americans help them to show them how to grow crops, but a lot of the crops that they were growing in Europe don't grow over here, so they had to relearn how to grow crops. That's why that food is so different. It all has to do with us as people. It's not like people were sitting around a commercial kitchen going, I want to make a dish. All the great dishes come from somewhere. I am definitely going to look that up. I'm Canadian and I don't remember learning that. Yeah. Well, it's not a very good story. It's whenever the British Empire ruled Canada. So, I mean, it's not necessarily Canadian. It was and the poem, it was in 1755 to 1764 was the expulsion of the Acadians. And it was the French settlers were forced out of northern America and southeast Canada. They were forced out because they wouldn't pledge allegiance to the British Empire. So like, all right, because they were being accused. There was the Acadians some of them were actually saboteurs, and they were sabotaging the British local rule. But some of them were complete innocents. We're talking men, women, and children that were they just wanted to be left alone. Well, the British Empire is like, we can't tell you apart. We don't know which one of you are saboteurs, and we don't know which one of you just hanging out doing your thing. So we're getting rid of all of you. So they packed them up on ships, and the ships left, and they sank. Like I said, thousands of people died in that expulsion. And then the majority of them that actually got out and didn't make it, they were either sent back to Europe or they ended up in Louisiana. And that's where we get Cajun food from, is from the French Canadians, which I think is amazing, because that directly affects how we look at America and how food is. It wasn't like somebody just woke up one day and said, I'm going to make gumbo. That's not how things work. And I don't want you guys to do the same thing. I don't want you to wake up one day and go, I want to make etouffee. You know, I want you to understand where it's from and why it's French and why it has that influence. Because then once you start, like, if you really like Cajun food, once you start to dig into that, you're going to end up in France. And then you can start jumping around those regions. I was a personal chef for 6 years, almost 7 years. And for the first 2 years, I never cooked the same thing twice. In my city, we have Little Italy, Chinatown, Little India, and African Avenue. So you can buy all the spices and definitely types of food. Really cool to have that availability in my backyard when learning to cook. So I'm excited to learn that all from you. Thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate that. And I will help you all that I can. And I'm trying to take the confusion out of it. Because I noticed that a lot of the times whenever people want to cook food, they run and they find a recipe. Well, I'm going to try this one. But imagine if you have the tools and the ability and the forethought to tackle that recipe before you ever look it up. It's a roadmap. If you know what region of whatever country, and that's what you're targeting, it's so much easier to find what they cook there than it is to take a recipe, then try and emulate something that you have no knowledge of. So gain the knowledge before you cook the food. And like with this, if you want to do it classical style, you start in the African continent, and you pick your countries in that continent, and then you start picking regions in those countries. You're going to have enough food, and you're never going to cook the same dish for years, just staying in that one original birthplace of humans. You'll have more food ideas than you'll ever be able to execute, and hopefully you've got some willing guinea pigs to eat the food that you're making, because you can always Americanize anything. Almost all American food is not actual Italian. It's not actual, it's not actual Chinese or Japanese. it's not actually that. It's Americanized for us because they, whenever they do it, it's original, and it's not necessarily palatable for us. So if you want to cook original food, or I'm sure that the places that, like, chop suey is not actually from Asia. Fortune cookies aren't real. That those they came from California. Yeah, my husband will be so happy. I'm going to stuff him like a turkey. That's great. Yeah, and that's what I mean. And because we're going to that's what we're doing. We're not only going to show you how to address all your vegetables and proteins and your grains and your starches, making pastas, doing breads, doing desserts. We're not only going to go that route, but we're also going to go through countries. So when we get a chicken, we're going to go to different countries, and I'm going to show you how this works so that you can make a dish from all these different countries out of the same piece of chicken. You can literally take a bunch of chicken breasts and set them aside and make them from different countries, literally right in front of yourself. You don't have to take the bulk of it all on. You've got to strip away all the stuff that isn't necessarily necessary. And so when you cook, then that's what is necessary, is what it is to make that dish taste like it came from that country. And it's easy, like I said, and then you learn basic knife skills and you learn basic cooking techniques, and you're on your way to becoming a very, very good home chef. Very good. So we're going to move on to the biggest influence ever in any cultural situation ever is the British Empire. I pulled up this map, and this is the influence of the British Empire at right before World War II. I believe this was in 1920 when this map, not made, but this shows the British influence throughout the world right before World War II. So in 1920, they had that pink stuff is British rule. So if you look down really close and you look at the Bahamas, it's pink. So when I went to the Bahamas, not realizing that it was under British rule for so long, and I ate that food, I was like, this tastes like British food. It's because their culture and everything was whitewashed by the British Empire. And if you look at Canada, you guys have a lot of British influence in your food and French influence in your food. But even if you look at America, for the right half of America, before the Revolution, it wasn't the Revolution, was it? No, it was help me out. No, non-American. Come on, help me out, Tech. Anybody. It wasn't the Revolution. It was a Revolutionary War? Yeah, against British?
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, my head's mush.
Who are you?
I know. So I just lost one American point.
You lost him.
I lost one American point. But yeah, so you see that their influence, and with them, they brought their food. With them, they brought the way that they cook stuff. So a lot of what you see all over the world is directly influenced by British food, which staggered me. I couldn't believe that their span of rule was so big. It went biggest empire ever was the British Empire. They controlled and they influenced. They controlled and they influenced so much. So when you start to look at the food, you can get pre or post British rule food. So when you go into regions, you can actually go into a region that before the spice trades. You can go into a region that was before the World War II, whenever the British Empire, after the British Empire collapsed because of World War II, then everything started to revert back to cultural. But it always has that British influence in it. You know, it's like curry. British curry is curry from the British people when they would eat food from another area. Like if you look, India was under British rule. Australia was under British rule. There was so much influence, they would bring this stuff back to Europe and they would eat it and they'd be like, oh, I'm going to recreate this. And they make their own idea of it, but it wasn't actually what it was. That's why Indian curry tastes so much different than British curry. So when you go into the spice rack in your local grocery store and you see curry, chances are you're picking up British curry, which isn't even a curry. It's just their idea of what curry was when they were going to India. And they're like, oh, we brought this idea back, and then they're like recreating it. So whenever you start to get into your masalas or your spice mixes, to make actual Indian food, then it's creativity beyond your wildest imagination. Because most curries are not hot. Most curries are so complex, and it's almost like a Spanish mole, but with like dried herbs. If you could wrap your head around that, it's really good. I love curries. I love masalas. I love Indian food. Yes. Now I have 2 techs behind the deck, so now I'm in trouble. Now I'm gonna go 2 techs behind the deck, 2 techs behind the deck. So as we start to look at the food that we're cooking, I will give you 1 Canadian point. Yay! So you get a 0.5 American. No, if you give me a Canadian point, that's 2 American points.
You lose about 6 American points for every Canadian point.
I don't think you guys are getting the conversion rate here.
No.
How does our money work?
Yeah. How does money work? No. No, I've been to Canada a few times and I love Canada. I really do. My favorite part of Canada is how you guys use the F word in the middle of a sentence and it means nothing. That's great. I love it. You're like, you guys using the F word. It's like saying what whenever you're talking in a sentence.
Stop cussing.
I'm making butter chicken tomorrow. Butter chicken from where?
Doesn't matter where the chicken's from, Kevin, remember?
No, where's she making the butter? What region is this butter chicken coming from? Because butter chicken. Oh, so it's a Canadian dish. See, now I'm fascinated. I'm really fascinated. It's a butter chicken is a Canadian dish. What's its origins? All the time.
That's for you.
I want to know. And now I'm fascinated. Butter chicken. Because honestly, Canadian food is solid French. That's the way I understand it. Well, I know the butter chicken's coming from you.
India.
But because butter chicken is Indian, right? It's an Indian dish.
It's an Indian dish.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I put butter chicken origin and it said
Yeah.
Indian.
So you're making an Indian dish.
Is it coming from my home?
I know. Which is great, but what region? Okay. Eli, tell me what ingredients it is that you're putting in this. Just the spices. That's all I want to know. I just want to know what spices in it.
I think it's Ellie.
Yeah, I called her like 16 different things. All I know is she's a female. That's all I've got. And I'm only assuming that because she said my husband. So I'm even being sexist about it. But I assume that she's a female and she's going to cook butter chicken, which is an Indian dish that it's going to be, then she's running to go find the spices.
Ginger paste, garlic paste.
No, I know what's in it, but I want to know what she's putting in it. I mean, it's not a test. I want to know how it's, because butter. I've seen it. I actually seen like since I started Twitch, I've actually seen like 3 people do this dish, which is okay. I'm adding curry spice. Okay, so that's the British curry, tomatoes, lemon juice, brown sugar, and cream. Okay, so the curry spice is the British curry. So the dish you're making isn't butter chicken. It's a version of butter chicken that has been influenced by the British rule that is probably either on top of your head or it's the Indian, or whenever British rule ran the Indian. So it's probably more of a modern dish. It's like a generic Indian dish that if you go to an Indian restaurant in America or in Canada and you say, I want butter chicken, that's what you're getting, is a generic version of actual masala, which would probably be in the tiki masala range. So that's garlic powder, onion powder, yeah. So that's what I'm assuming that you're aiming. The history of that dish itself is more modern. It's not from India. It's more of a British dish. So that little rundown helps you understand that, because a lot of people go to an Indian restaurant and they'll order, like there's certain Asian restaurants in the area that we live that you go in and you ask for a dish from a different country, but it's still Asian. They get upset. You know, you go in there and you ask for those crab rangoons, and that's not from their country. They get upset, and I guess they could. I mean, they should. There's a lot of Indians here, so they have a Canadian style. Exactly. That's what I said earlier. They will Americanize it, or in your case, Canadianize it, so that you're able. So because you don't really want, there's places in Asia where they eat medium rare chicken legs, where it's pink around the bone. It's not even cooked. They eat chicken heads and chicken feet, and in that country, that's great. They eat bugs. They eat big old like beetle bugs on sticks. Imagine trying to pull that off in a restaurant in Canada. You're like, oh, what's on my appetizer? Big old fat beetle stuck on a stick. It's not going to float. But that's what they eat. There's some places in South America that eat like tortillas full of live bugs. And they eat it. And that's just what they eat. So, yeah, it has to have some sort of an semblance. It has to be backed off. So, America is unique in the way that we address our food because we're so influenced by everybody that is here. I know it's yuck. It's very yuck. So whenever you look at American food, everybody, it's really weird because I talk to a lot of people from all over the world and they want to come here and have a hamburger. They want a fast food hamburger. And to me that blows my mind. Because there's literally, you could leave my house and drive 5 minutes and you're going to pass 10 hamburger places. So, but that's what they want. They want to come here and they want a hamburger and French fries because that is so rare to them. Because you go to their country, if I went anywhere and I stayed for like 6 months, like if I went to Southeast Asia or Asia Minor or somewhere, I would weigh 700 pounds because I would just eat all the time. Every day I would just eat 9-10 meals a day to experience all of that. So it's weird to watch them when you're like, what is the one meal you want? And if they're not from America, they'll be like, I want a hamburger. That's like, wow. That's amazing. So to me, the way that we address each other's cultures and the way we address each other's food directly affects how we feel and what we do. It has always. Everything we've always done in our lives directly affects what we eat. We wake up in the morning and the first thought that we have within 20 minutes is what are we going to put inside our bodies? And it's a shame and it's sad that we don't have the knowledge to be able to correctly understand what we put in our bodies. And I'm not just talking health-wise. I'm just talking the what we're missing out on. The excitement and the amazing complexities of culture that we're eating. Something as simple as like when somebody comes here and has an American cheeseburger. To get to that point, and the German influence and all the other influences that come into actually ending up there, the Italian influence of the hamburger, the German influence of the hamburger, all of these other countries have influenced that simple hamburger. And to us, it's as American as apple pie, which if you want to say apple pie is American is saying that French is American because the French are the ones who started the pie. So it's just, it's amazing. Take, for instance, chicken. Chicken was originally the chicken, the bird itself, is from Asia. That's where it originates. And then all of a sudden now it's all over every continent and everywhere. And the reason is because it's an easy animal to bring with you, and it's an easy animal that multiplies, and it makes eggs. It makes eggs and it multiplies very fast, and they're easy to take care of. So whenever they would come over, they would bring these birds all over, and this is the coolest story. Whenever the spice route, the Silk Road was going, the chicken was one of the first domesticated animals, and they would make it on the spice road, and it would make it to Europe. At the exact same time, that chicken was being taken through Russia and Alaska and America, and when the chicken made it to the United States through the slave and spice routes that Columbus discovered, the chicken that was going this way made it to America through Alaska and down into the Americas at the same time. So the chicken left in two different. Somebody said, why did the chicken cross the road? He didn't. He went both directions. That's a terrible joke. I didn't think it out.
Ooh.
Shut up.
Wait, what? What did he say?
So the chicken ended up in America at the exact same time, all the way around the world. They took two different routes, ended up in the same place. That to me, I was fascinated by that, and that's what I mean by just looking up the history of the food you eat. You gain so much appreciation for all the stuff that people had to go through, so that simple dish in front of you has a history. It has a story behind it, like the difference between northern Italian food and southern Italian food. There's a huge difference between the two. And if you just say, I want Italian food, I wonder if McDonald's tastes the same all over the world. I had McDonald's in Italy. The only difference was I was able to order a beer with my quarter pounder.
Nice.
For me, I felt a little less homesick. LOL, I rarely eat McDonald's. Technically, yes, it's supposed to taste the same all over the world. I ate at a McDonald's in Turkey, and it tasted like McDonald's. I mean, they had other stuff on the menu, and the price range was weird because it wasn't in American dollars. It said like 10,000. I believe the currency of Turkey at the time was, what was it? It was 10,000 somethings. And I was like, I don't know what that is.
It's not rubles, is it?
I don't think so. No, it's okay. That's why we're here to talk about it and discover it. And I want to get you guys hyped up about this. And the only way I can get it hyped up is to show you, demonstrate it, and take you on this travel. Not like Canada. Canada, I'm sure. You know what? I'm actually, now that I'm talking to you, I actually want to do some research. And whenever we do countries, because we're gonna spend a whole month on each country. So as we're going through these months, we're gonna spend a whole month on a country and their culture and their food and the pre-British, the post-British. We're going to spend as much as we can on making dishes from each country and showing you the similarities, because that's what this is about, is tying everything back together. So whenever you start to cook, you'll be able to take that chicken and take it all the way around the world, because it's the same chicken. It cooks to the same temperature. All you're doing is influencing it through the past, and everything that everybody went through will determine what that chicken tastes like, but it's still just chicken. It doesn't know where it's being cooked. So I once we learn the fundamentals, which is how to cook a chicken, how to cut, how to buy, how to cut, how to cook, what types of chickens are there. Once we go through all that, you'll have a massive library to choose from as far as what type of food you want to make. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, next week we're doing vegetables. We're going to spend a whole week on just vegetables. And tomorrow we do our mother sauces, so we'll have all kinds of sauces to be able to put onto the vegetables, which is going to be great. So that next week when we get into the difference between a hard vegetable and a soft vegetable, there's only two vegetables you need to learn how to cook: a hard vegetable and a soft vegetable. All vegetables fall into either category. So once you learn how to cook a hard vegetable, then you've got all the hard vegetables taken care of. And once you learn how to cook a soft vegetable, and I'll show you the difference between the two, then you can cook any vegetable that you pull out of the ground. So, did you know the potato came from Peru? Tech.
Me?
Everybody. I found that out. The potato originated in Peru, and it was purple. Yeah. Because everyone's like Irish, Irish, Irish. No, it came from Peru. So, that just popped in my head. I just thought it was great. So, whenever the influence of the, like you said, the hamburger, it's universal. It's all over the world, and people they gravitate to it. But people in America, like with you in Canada, you have all these different markets within range of yourself. But if you go to any other country, they're pretty secluded into the type of food that they offer. They're pretty secluded. Yeah, they have McDonald's and they have all that stuff. But if you get outside of that main area, you're going to get actual authentic food. And some of it is going to be scary because of the ingredients. But that's where we want to head. That's where I want to go. When I cook food, that's where I want to end up. I don't want to make an Americanized version of it. I want to end up where they are, because I want to appreciate everything that they've been through to get that dish. You know, where was it original? Why are these herbs here? Were they grown here or were they brought here? You know what I mean? So it fascinates me. It fascinates me whenever I start to deconstruct stuff, and figure out where stuff's from. Maybe after learning all of this, my husband may want to remarry me, LOL, and the food will be amazing. Well, I will do my best. You will definitely not get. Assuming that once you get all of this underneath you, that you're gonna cook and you're gonna enjoy it. And I get so much joy from cooking that isn't confined by what I have to do to cook it. So to me, it's super exciting to do this within this parameter, which is Twitch, and cook food, and then show everybody that the easy way to cook food. Because no matter where you're from, no matter what size kitchen you got, no matter what your skill level is, you can cook great food. We just have to strip away all the unnecessary fluff and get down to the bare bones of it. And then once you build a bare bones approach to it, then you're able to expand from there. Then you can build a recipe Rolodex inside your head of, I know how to cook chicken. Because like I said yesterday, when chicken makes it to a certain temperature, it's done. You can't do anything to it. You should not do anything to it after that. Thanks for that earthquake. You hit the monitor and went,
Oh, my bad.
That's okay. But so once we get into it, and there's parameters and there's guidelines that you have to stay within, because nobody jumps out of an airplane and expects to end up on your couch in your living room. You've got to have some sort of guidance to get to where you're going. That's a terrible analogy, but I'm going to stick to it. That's my analogy for the day. Don't jump out of an airplane expecting to land on your couch.
That's the worst thing
I like
heard
it.
you say today.
I think it's great. I think it's
In the past
apropos.
hour.
I think it's apropos.
I believe this is.
I love it. So it's mine. I'm keeping it. I'm going to change the title of the page to that. Don't jump out of an airplane expecting to land on your couch. Learn how to cook. Huh?
That's a long name.
I don't even think I have enough characters in my because it limits your amount of characters that you can use.
Take all the vowels out.
So, let me go over what we're going to be doing. You don't have the laptop plugged in. It's going to die. I can see the cord and I can see the 53%.
I got it.
So this week, we're starting tomorrow, we're going to do the mother sauces. So we're going to start cracking open the frying pans. We're going to start moving stuff around. I'm actually going to start cooking. And we're going to go over it and over it and over it and over it. It's going to be second nature. I'm going to show you how to cook it. I'm going to show you how to make it. I'm going to show you how to store it. I'm going to show you the ingredients needed to do it. And then I will probably post on Instagram one of the things. I'll find somewhere to be able to set it out so that you have a list. You can always come back and watch the video too. So that's another thing that Twitch finally started saving my videos, so I'm super excited about that. So whenever you come back, tomorrow we're doing the mother sauces, and then Friday we're going to do our wrap up. So we're going to talk about the week, what you guys want me to do, what you guys would like to see me do, what we can do to make this better. And please tell the people you know. It's like I'm just ushering you into the kiddie pool, and eventually you're going to be in the deep end. So the more you do this, the more you start to reprogram your way of thinking about food, then you will this will become easier. Because this is completely different than anything you will ever hear from anybody ever. You will never hear another person talking the way I do about food. Because this is a learned experience, and I've taken this ideas and concepts and I've bounced them off of people, and nobody has ever told me, oh, I know that, or I've heard of that, or I've seen that. This is totally different, and this is taking food and uncomplicating it so that anybody can make the same food. As long as you follow the simple guidelines, we're going to learn knife skills, we're going to learn how to cut vegetables, we're going to learn how to store vegetables, we're going to learn how to cook vegetables, we're going to learn how to pair stuff with other stuff, and that's all cultural. Whenever we have a dish, we're making something as simple as asparagus, roasted asparagus with a hollandaise sauce. That's great together. Those two things work together. Very French. So why do those two things work together? Well, the acidity in the asparagus is counteracted by the fat that's in the hollandaise sauce. So you get a counterbalance. And every time you make a dish, you want to kind of balance. You don't want to go too sour, too hot, too bold, and you don't want to go too bland, too buttery, too creamy. So once you move one, you have to start moving the other. So you balance. You start at balance because you can't stack anything unless it's balanced. Because once it's balanced, you can start stacking, and that's the flavors that you get, and it becomes second nature. You understand that all acids have to be counterbalanced with a fat, and then that's just what you end up doing. That's how your brain reprograms itself. I don't want you to be a victim to a recipe. I don't want you to be a slave to having to look down while you're cooking. You know, it's like looking down while you're trying to create art. It takes away from the excitement. It takes away from the experience of cooking the food. I want you to just be in there. I want you to be neck deep in produce and vegetables and you know, proteins. I want you to be in it. And the only way you can get in it is to get away from trying to stare at a piece of paper and remember what goes where, and now I have to do this. And I want to give you back control. Because I guarantee you, 200 years ago, there wasn't the internet and there wasn't people looking up recipes online, and that's where all this food comes from. Yeah. Yeah, you should be an artist in your kitchen. You're spending the time, you're spending the time to come in here and listen to me ramble on. So I really appreciate that. If you can follow me, that would be great. And if you could tell other people to follow me so I can get my associates, I don't know what it is. It's something like that. So I can start pushing this more. Associate's degree in culinary. That's basically, I was going to say that. You're basically going to get a culinary degree for free. All you got to do is show up. And the videos will be down below, posted in 001 format. So you'll always be able to pick up where you left off if you happen to miss one. So you'll always have the opportunity to rehash through what we're doing. If it's something that I spun out of control on, yes, associate's degree in Twitch, exactly. But if I spun out of control on it and you're watching the video and you're like, he went off the rails, then the next time we start up another chat, remember it's every day at 6 o'clock, we're doing something. And then on Tuesday, it starts at 2 because I play D&D and I don't want to miss that, but I will start my stream early. And then once we get into this, we'll start doing weekend bonus streams, and we'll start doing barbecue, and we'll start doing the stuff that takes longer. Roasts, oven roast. I'll show you how to make your Thanksgiving Day turkey. I'll show you how to make your Thanksgiving Day spread. When I make Thanksgiving dinner, it takes 4 days from start to finish. And it's done by noon on the day of. That's another thing. The number one thing that I've noticed with home cooks is they have difficulty timing out their dishes so that everything ends up at the table at the exact same time and it's all hot and fresh. That's something that I've noticed a lot of people struggle with, and I can show you ways to take that out of the equation, that it just makes more sense to do it in increments of 15 minutes, and I'll explain that whenever we get into actually start making stuff like that. But like for instance, November is going to be America. I was thinking about doing it in July, but the only thing American in July is the 4th of July, but America is Thanksgiving.
You just had to make hot dogs.
We could make hot dogs. I mean, but I'm going to make German hot dogs.
I'm about it now.
Yeah. We'll grind our own meat. That's what I want to do. I want to show you how to make breads. I'm going to show you how to make pastries. I'm going to show you how to cure bacon. I'm going to show you how to smoke turkey and make sliced turkey, roast beef. You should have a... Of course you love hot dogs. They're American. They're American as German hot dogs. It's so funny when people say that. Another favorite saying of mine is easy as pie. Pies are freaking hard. That is the worst saying I've ever heard. Easy as pie. No, pies are hard.
Pie.
No.
Easy as eating pie, yeah.
Easy as buying pie. That's not as easy as it gets. Easy as knowing there's a pie somewhere. Baking is hard. It's hard because there's a lot of bad information. I went to an advanced baking class in Oregon, and I learned a lot, and I just want to pass on that information. And baking is I always look at baking as like playing with Legos. You stack, they're rigid, they're square, they're unmovable, and you stack them to make something, whereas cooking is like playing with Play-Doh. It moves, it's adjustable, it's squishy, but baking is pretty straightforward. Yes. Fuck baking. No, I want to. Okay, that's my quest.
Baking sucks.
Immediately contradicting.
My quest is to teach you to love baking. All right? I guarantee you by the time you're done with our baking stuff, but with the baking part of it, when we go through the breads, and you're gonna tolerate. Let's pull back on the love part. You're gonna enjoy baking. Because the worst part of baking is it's freaking frustrating. It's like balancing plates on the end of, and you just don't know what you're doing.
It's easy as pie.
Yeah, it's easy as pie.
I'm an artist, not a scientist.
Right,
Fair.
but you can just trust me. You're gonna love it. I guarantee you. The things that you make from doing it properly and understanding what's going on. Well, remember, because we're always going to answer the question why. We're never going to just say add this to this, put this in that. We're always going to answer that question why. And like I was saying earlier, if we're doing something, if we're in a country and we're in a region and we're working on that, and we're doing a dish out of that region and that country, you are going to be reminded of the region and the country and the dish and the how we approach our proteins, how we approach our starches, how to cut a vegetable. It will always be reiterated. I will always bring it back up. I will never tell you and then cut this, because there's so much more that you have to bring into the conversation whenever you talk about something as simple as a mushroom and the different types of mushroom and what's the best way to cook a mushroom. So even if we're making a dish that has like a beef Wellington, if we're making beef Wellington, which has the mushroom paste that goes in the beef Wellington, even if we're dealing with that, you still know how to properly address those mushrooms. Each individual item in food needs to have its just conversation. We need to go over it every time we touch it so that you're competent and you will start picking up on these things. And like I said yesterday, maybe you don't want to cook. Maybe you're just in here because I'm charming and awesome. Maybe that's why you're in here. But the next time you go to a restaurant or the next time you go over to somebody's house to eat, if you carry this knowledge with you, you'll be able to not only take what you say and what you've learned into a different environment, but it's there to protect you. Because if you go to a restaurant and they mishandled the food, then you are dealing with something that could possibly get you or your loved ones sick. So knowledge is power. You know, like I said, like I brought up the conversation about potatoes yesterday. That potatoes are, a green potato in a grocery store is poisonous. All herbs are poisonous. All spices are poisonous. We have grown an immunity to them, but when was the last time you ate a dish that didn't agree with you? Most likely it was the components of the dish that actually made you not feel well. You may have an acute allergic reaction to a spice, or it was mishandled, or it's just something your body doesn't agree with. Oh, I will be a star. Everyone I know does Uber Eats. None of my friends cook, not for their kids and husbands. I'm stoked. Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Yep. I mean, once you start pulling this stuff and getting the knowledge under your belt, you're going to be so confident. You're going to know how to do this. And that's this. Like I said yesterday, chefs aren't wizards. We weren't born and pulled out of a rock like a sword and then we went off and we started cooking. Chefs didn't invent food. The situation and the surroundings that were thrust upon them forced them to make food. And then people liked it.
Make good food,
Or they didn't like it. Yeah, some of them did. Some of them made good food or died. But it was relevant to, if you want to see some stuff, go back to look at like banquets of kings. Look at the menus for those. There's one, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what they do. Let me see if I can get this right. There is a meal that was served to a king. They take an ostrich and they stuff a goat inside. It's like the turducken, but on a giant scale. They take an ostrich and they stuff a goat and they stuff a pig and then ducks, and they all stuff this in this ostrich and cook it. It's like the size of a car. And that was what they had. That was their fancy food. If you walked into a restaurant and there was a giant table in the middle and there was a dead ostrich there, you would run out of there screaming. But that's how they ate. That's what I mean. This isn't magic. This isn't wizardry. You can cook just as well as anybody you know. Probably better if you just strip away all the unnecessary worry and the unnecessary knowledge that's been thrust around. Because, I mean, just like anything else, it's like playing the game of telephone. You start out with a simple phrase, and by the end of it, it's not even the same thing. Food's the same way. It's been overcomplicated because it's like everybody wants to put their spin on it, or everybody wants to put their well, I don't know what it's called. It's not called a turducken, but they made fun of it, and it's like a ghost. Argopa, I don't know. It's all those words combined. But it's horrible. It weighs like, I think it weighs like 800 pounds. It's just ridiculous. They like stuff every barn animal that you can, I didn't even think Wilbert was stuffed in there. Every barn animal. The Berenstain Bears ended up in there. They just stuffed. I cooked 2 to 3 dinners at night for my husband. He's Italian, so he loves food and late night dinners. So I believe I can learn a lot from you. Thank you. I will give you a shot and see how we blend and maybe sub. I appreciate that. I really do. And like I said, I'm here to help. I'm not here to tell you this is how you do something. I will always tell you why you're doing that. I will always point out why we're doing what we're doing on everything, from how we hold our knives to how we hold our offhand to why we use a cutting board this size to why we're using this knife to the different edges of that knife to everything every time I do it, because knowledge is power. And the stronger I can get you into knowledgeable cooking, the easier all the other stuff becomes. Because if you just look at it as a culinary entity, like, where do you start? What part of it do you even begin to look at? There's over 2,860,000,000 websites with the word recipe on them. How could you possibly wrap your head around that? How could you possibly utilize that information? That's overwhelming. So let's not use the internet for looking up the word recipe. Let's use the internet for looking up history. Let's use the internet for looking up the ideas and the concepts behind the food we want to make. Because that's way more powerful than put a teaspoon here and add a cup here. And that gives you creativity. Because everybody that yearns to cook in a kitchen does it because they want to be creative. They want to do something creative. So why handicap yourself by putting a recipe in front of you that you're following? And then you tweak that recipe. Why not understand that dish to the point where you know that no matter what dish you make, it has already been tried. Every possible combination of a dish has already been tried. And the only ones that make it are the classics. So stick to the classics. Then you can start making the adjustments, because most food adjustments were made because of particular taste for the people that were eating it. You know, if you look a lot of the inventions that were, the hamburger was just an angry chef who took a meatball and smashed it and put it between 2 pieces of bread. That's how. So it was an Italian meatball that was smashed, stuck in between 2 pieces of bread and eaten. That's the hamburger. So it's always out of necessity. It's always out of anger. It's always out of conquering. It's always out of fighting. It's always out of, discovery, where this food has come from. So don't cheat yourself by not taking that discovery, by not coming back to its roots and appreciating everything about that food. And realistically, finding out the region and then the season and the availability takes 5 minutes on the internet. No, wait. Angry Italians. Thank you. I love burgers. But it's true. Let's boycott recipes. I'm in complete agreement with you. When you first start to learn how to properly cook and address food, recipes are your worst enemy, because they knock you off track. They take you away from where you should be, and where you should be is working on your skill set and building your knowledge and your mental library about what food does and what it doesn't. When food is cooked and when it isn't cooked, and when it's overcooked. What food can cook, what region am I in? I always want you to approach it like that. Like I said, every good chef answers those 3 questions before they ever put fire to pan. And if you answer those 3 questions, then you can start building. And you'll be shocked whenever you go and you pick a country, just one country, and you start pulling apart the regions, and you'll see how, the migration of the spices, most of them are grown there. Or you'll see the influence of an invading force bringing in their own concept of food, how it changes, how that you are looking at that food. So then you can start making food pre-invasion, and then you can make food post-invasion. You could be so complex in your own food, and you never looked at a recipe. You never looked the word recipe up on the internet. And you could be cooking exact food from periods of time, from regions that may or may not have changed 1,000 years or have changed constantly. That's what the internet's good for. The internet's best for that. Looking up recipes is the worst idea that I've ever done on the internet, because every single recipe has a flaw, and every recipe that you look isn't yours. And you don't understand why they're doing what they do. And that's what I want to help you with. And if you show me a recipe, absolutely. Barbecue, absolutely. I'm from South Texas, and we're going to make... I live in South Texas. But I can cook barbecue better than anybody down here. So take that, South Texas. But yeah, we're gonna make barbecue. I'm gonna teach you how to make South Texas barbecue. And brisket, we're gonna make cabrito, which is goat. Because people down here will murder you for goat. So we're gonna get some goat, and the interesting thing, I know, sick. Like, sick isn't good. The most interesting thing about cabrito is it cooks just like a brisket. Same time, same temperatures, and that's what all land animals cook the same way. You're going to hit these temperature points. Like I said yesterday, I don't know if whoever wasn't here, the most important kitchen tool you can have is a thermometer. A thermocouple thermometer. You have to have a thermometer if you want to cook properly. Anything short of everything, even baked goods, you need a good thermometer. So, thermometer, a chef knife, cutting board, everything else is cake. Some pots and pans. They don't even need to be nice pots and pans. Just a pot and a pan. Like I said, go to a restaurant supplier. Look up restaurantsupplycompany.com and buy a frying pan. They're like $20 for a 12-inch nonstick frying pan, and it's the one they use in restaurants, and it lasts forever. $13. Sorry. $13 for a frying pan that if you burn or set on fire or throw at somebody, then you can always get another one. I am Albanian, so we love the Texans. Aw, we are similar cattle and oil. Yeah? You're an Albanian Canadian. That's fucking great.
That's sweet.
Is
That's
that
sweet.
Albanian or Albertan?
Albertan. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, she's Albertan.
Albanian's not
No.
even a thing.
I'm sorry. I've got tired head.
Tired head.
I've got tired head.
From
Alberta,
Alberta.
Canada. All right. I apologize.
You lost the sub there.
Yeah,
No,
they're gone.
I apologized. She's with me. She's still with me. But okay, Alberta, Canada. Right. Got you. Because you told me you were Canadian, so I don't know why you're Albanian. So look up that story about the Cajuns. That's good read. It's okay. I thought you got a 0.5 for one. We are even. All right, we're even. All right, I'm back to 0. I love it.
No, you're still missing your American point.
Yeah, now you
Yeah.
got negative in both countries, man.
Wow.
All right,
I'm
you guys
still
are.
streaming in Mexico.
All right, I'm also interviewing for new tech. New tech support.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Heard.
Jesse, let's go.
Yeah, we're good. Stream
Yeah, we're
cuts
leaving.
off.
I said I'm interviewing. Didn't say you guys are done. But you are still up.
Don't do that, Gavin.
Yes, I'm still up. I'm still ahead. So, like I was saying, let's go back over what we're going to do. Like tomorrow we're doing the mother sauces, so we will start with those. And I will show you how to make them. I will show you how to store them. Because they're always good to have on hand. There's no reason that you shouldn't have the mother sauces on hand. There's no reason you have to make them every time you need them. You should always have a little bit, at least a starter. You should have a good roux in your fridge ready to go so that you can just scoop some out and use it as a thickener. We'll go over different types of thickeners. what you should use in something and what you shouldn't use in something. And then Friday we'll do our recap. And then I believe that Friday is pans off, dance off, where we take the pans off the stove and then we talk about the whole week and what we're looking for. And hopefully when I get to 50 followers, then I can start to really push a lot more content. And like I said, it's not that the 50, I'm going to push more content anyway, but I'd like to be able to connect it to all my other stuff so that whenever I say, hey, this is the product that we're using today, this is the website you can go to, then I can have links in my stream that is easier than making you go and search for it yourself. And I'm working on a Discord. I was brought up yesterday that I needed a Discord, so I've got to set that up. I've got it attached. I just don't know how to make a button so that you can scroll down into my stuff and then click on Discord. So I'm still I'm really new to the technology side of this, so I'm kind of flying blind when it comes to that, but I'm hoping that with support and from you guys and my tech team,
We're out.
that could help me fix all this. Apparently I just lost a tech person. But so, and then next week the schedule comes out on Sundays. So every Sunday you'll get a new schedule posted. And if you follow me on the other platforms like Twitch and Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, we'll post it on those too. And if you have any questions, get a hold of us on any one of those platforms. It's always Lessons in Cookery. Except for Twitter wouldn't let me put the S, so it's Lesson in Cookery for some weird reason. They said I was one too many letters, so they took out the S. But so next week we're doing vegetables. We're going to start out Monday and we're going to do a grand history lesson, like where did potatoes come from? The original potato was actually purple. So we're going to go over that. We're going to go over the different types of vegetables, the different seasons, and kind of a good way to gauge how to pick out fresh vegetables and fruits in the grocery store or at a farmer's market or wherever you're getting them from. If you want to regrow something in your backyard, you can literally take a stalk of celery and just chop off the bottom part and stick it in the ground and celery grows up. Yes, Lessons in Cookery. Oh, it's missing the I. Or is it lesson? Are you asking me?
Right now.
It should be Lessons in Cookery.
Back to the rest.
Lessons in Cookery. But
No, it's lesson in cookery, yeah.
oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that catch. But like I said, follow us so you can get all the updates, and follow us so that we can get to 50 followers so that we can grow this. And this is something that I'm hoping that even if two of you are in here and you do something that changes the way you cook food and improves the quality of your food, then I'm happy. You know, and I just think getting the word out, tell the people you know, this is your channel. I'm just here to help you. And if you want this to be, a constant full-time thing, then I'm kind of leaving that in your guys' lap so that you're able to tell everybody. Hopefully you change the way you cook food and you make a dish and somebody's like, oh my God, this is great. How'd you learn how to cook this? And then you reciprocate, and I just end up with another person sitting in chat watching me talk. But this will be, other than Fridays, we're cooking from here on out. So starting next week we do vegetables, and then we will go to pastas and grains the week after. So we're going to learn how to make pasta. We're going to learn how to store pasta. We're going to learn the differences between rices. We're going to oh, okay. Then so everything that we do every week will always come back to the original conversations that we've had this week. I will always show you what country I'm cooking from. I will always show you how to use knives properly. I will show you how to store stuff. I will always constantly remind you of what we're doing and how we're doing it so that you're able to build your library. And if you have any questions or you get lost, like I said, all of our videos are tagged 001, 002, so they'll all be in succession, so you're able to go back and watch or fast forward through certain parts that may or may not have made sense. And if it still doesn't make sense, then get a hold of us so that we can definitely answer your questions, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to impress you with my cooking skills. I'm here to help. I'm here to help make everything that you cook not only great, but I also want to make it to where you enjoy doing it. And that's most important. is you enjoy learning about the history of the food that you're cooking for not only yourself but anyone else that you happen to be cooking for. That's super important to me. So what I want from everyone is like I said, get a hold of us, send us ideas. What do you want to see from this channel? What do you want to see us do? You know, because I'm thinking we're going to do countries. I think after we do pastas and grains, we're going to start with our proteins. So we're going to start doing a week worth of chicken, then a week worth of beef, and then a week worth of seafood. And then probably in between that, we're probably going to jump back to vegetarian, do different types of diets, like, you know, address vegans, address vegetarians, address the keto diet, you know, people that have allergies, because I actually did food demonstrations for a children's hospital, because the kids that were literally in the hospital, they had to have transfusions like all the time. So their diet was very specific, but we could still make food for a very specific, you know, diabetes or whatever it is that may be ailing you. Something as simple as, you know, lactose intolerance or a peanut allergy or whatever it might be. I want to address that, but still maintain the quality of the food. The saddest thing I ever did was whenever I was doing meals for delivery, and this lady was overweight, and her doctor told her that she couldn't eat this, this, and this. So the first time I talked to her, she just told me she was tired of eating this bland chicken, because all she would do is boil a chicken breast, and that's what she would have. And that broke my heart, because there's so much more you could do with that, and it has nothing to do with dietary restrictions. Fresh herbs, fresh spices, you know, light vegetable. You don't have to drown vegetables in something to make them taste great. Vegetables taste great. You just have to have them properly cooked so that you can enjoy the vegetable. So it's not all blanched out or it's all thrashed out because it was overcooked. So how we treat our food is super important. In all the aspects of everything else, if it's loss or weight loss, or if it's constant like acid reflux, or if it's a dietary thing because of ailment or age, you know, how do you make? When I was running a restaurant, we would make on the spot. We would make baby food for babies. So we always tried to cater to the people that were coming in. And I want to do the same thing on this channel. I want to give you guys the opportunity to learn from me, but not just watch me and go, oh, I'm going to try that. I want you to go, I want to learn that so that I can do that. And that has nothing to do with recipes. And it has nothing to do with anything but your desire to want to cook food. And my only desire is to help you. So if you follow me, like I said, if you tell everybody and we get a lot of people in here, that would be great. So that encourages me that it's working and that people are listening, that people are following along. And then, like I said, as we get into it, we'll do our barbecues, and then we'll start going to different countries, and then I'll leave it up to you guys. And then I was thinking about doing for incentives, I was thinking about doing once I can do subscriptions, then we'll do a subscription draw. Then, like, for everybody that subscribes, they enter into a contest. And then we do Skype one-on-one cooking classes. So I would Skype you, and we would talk and agree on an idea of a dish, and then I'll go buy the same ingredients, and then we'll meet up, we'll Skype, and we'll literally cook that dish, you and I, one-on-one. And I think that that's the best way I can give my personal attention to what it is that's being cooked, and that you can learn the most from that. And I think that's a great, I may just start giving them away for nothing, you know, just because you guys come in here and hang out. You know, I don't know how to gauge it, but I mean, I'd rather give it to the people that come in and are loyal. You know what I mean? That come in and consistently. I don't want just somebody to happen to sneak in and get it, because it's important and it means a lot to me. But it's a way I can give cooking classes to anybody anywhere, and I think that's a really super great idea. So, if you guys have any questions, like I said, get a hold of us. And then as we grow, then, like I said, every Sunday we put our menu out, our weekly classes. And tentatively, unless things change, I need some tea. They start at 6, except for on Tuesday. Then we start at 2 on Tuesday. And if it's the wrong time, if everyone's like, oh, we can never make it, then let me know, because we can always adjust the time, too.
Should put out like a list of stuff, like with the menu on Sunday, like hey, this is and you can cook along on Tuesday or whatever.
So I appreciate you all coming in. I've got to go start dinner. I know you're all going to be like, well, I want to see you cook dinner. It's too soon. We got to get through the mother sauces first. And it's just chicken breast. It's not that exciting. It is whenever you do it from scratch. But I love you guys. You guys are awesome. High five to each and every one. Ellie, I'm calling you Ellie. Ellie Melelli.
Ellie Melly 66.
Ellie Melly. You have been awesome. I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate your input. I appreciate you talking to us. It makes this go so much more smoothly. And whoever else is in the room, in chat, don't be shy. Talk to me. I'm here to help. If you have any questions, I'm more than eager to over-explain them to the point where you're just like, enough. I know everything now. So I really appreciate you guys. And we will see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And bring your aprons, because we're making mother sauces.